Right, so that's the basic options that will apply to all of the different brushes, mostly. But to make things a little bit more interesting, let's look at some of the tools now while we model something completely different. So let's come out of Sculpt mode into Object mode. I'm just going to move this out of the way. In fact, let's just delete it. And we'll do Shift-A. And this time we're going to add a UV sphere. We'll go into Sculpt mode. And I need to add some subdivisions because at the moment we don't have enough to sculpt on. So we'll go R, and we'll just drag this down till we've got more subdivisions. And then Control R to add those subdivisions in. And then I want to get rid of the faceting. So we can see, even though we've got a lot of subdivisions, we still see the original faces. So what we need to do is smooth this out. Now, we could use the smooth brush that we've got here and just drag around like this. But that's going to take a long time, and we're not going to get a very uniform result. We're going to sort of get quite a messy result. So instead, we're going to use the tools down at the bottom here, which will apply to the entire mesh. So we're going to choose the mesh filter, and then in the top here, we've got the filter type. So we can change the operation to smooth. And now if we drag along like this, it will smooth out the entire mesh. If you don't like the result, before you let go of the mouse button, you can drag back to the left. So right is going to smooth it, left is going to undo it. And quite often you want to model on two sides of the model at the same time so that you've got symmetry. So if you look over here in the tool menu, we've got the symmetry options, and this will use the object's local coordinates to mirror across. So if I choose the X coordinate, you'll see we're getting, if I just zoom in a little bit, we'll choose a different tool so it's more obvious. You'll see we're getting a blue circle on the left. This is the one I'm going to be drawing on. But on the right, we've got a little tiny blue dot, and that's where the mirrored modification is going to take place. So if I draw there now, you'll see we're getting the same result on the other side. And we can change this to be, let's just minimize these. We can change it to Y, which obviously is going to be the different direction. Or we can change it to Z. That's going to be the bottom. Or we can have it in all three. Like so. So really handy. Normally I would only have it in one. So I'm going to keep it on, and we'll leave it on the X-axis. Now quite often you want to be able to have more control over the parts that you're going to be affecting with the brushes. So let's say, for example, you don't want to affect a particular area. You want to be able to mask that out so that none of the brushes will affect that area of the model. So let's show you how that works. If we go into the mask brush we've got here, we can then draw a mask onto the object. Now, you might want to change things like the strength, and you might want to change the fall off as well. I've set it to constant. That means we're going to get a nice hard edge. And if we set the strength to 1, it's going to be fully masked out. So I like to do it that way. And then after I've finished, I can choose mask and then smooth the mask to make sure the edges are nice and smooth. If I don't do that, and I draw over it now, then you see we're going to get quite a harsh edge at the side there. So I need it to be quite smooth. So mask, smooth mask, and now if we do it, we're getting more of a gradual transition between the mask and the non-masked area. And I can't draw on that masked part. So let's just undo that. Now let's start by making some eyeballs for this object. So I'm going to use the mask tool again. I'm just going to draw out an area for the eyes, making sure that the little white dot is, about eyeball distance apart from the main one that you're drawing on. So I'll start drawing. I'll make it full strength, make it quite large. Maybe something like that. And then I'll smooth it. So mask, smooth mask. I'm actually going to invert it. So Control I, that's going to invert the mask so that I can only draw on this part. And I want to inset this area. So I'm going to use the draw tool, I'm going to do Control, so it does the opposite, and just keep drawing until those have gone in a little bit. And then you see the faces have become quite large on the side there, so I'm going to remesh it again. So R, just to check the size, about there, Control R, and then it's going to remesh it. And now we've got more resolution, which we can then smooth with a smooth brush, or with the mesh filter set to smooth mode. So let's now clear the mask so that we can continue shaping the rest of the mesh. So we go Mask, Clear Mask, and now we're working back again with the full mesh. Now one of the really handy tools is the grab tools we've got here. So we've got the normal grab, where we can move certain areas like so. Again, we can affect it with the size of the brush. Or we've got the elastic smooth, or elastic deform, which is the same sort of thing, but it has a much smoother fall off. So if I do a small area like this, it's going to emulate an elastic material with a much softer and more gradual fall off. Okay, so just move your eye sockets around until you've got a shape you like. I'll probably go with the grab brush actually. I'm going to make him a little bit angry. Bring those down. Bring these ones up. Maybe bring them in a bit as well. Something like that. I think I'll probably smooth it a bit now. So I'll go into the mesh filter and I'll start smoothing it out. I think just for reference, I'm going to come out of sculpt mode, back into object mode. I'm going to add a few eyeballs in. So I'll put the 3D cursor there by shift right clicking. I'll do shift A. I'm going to add a UV sphere. I'll scale that down and we'll rotate it round on the x-axis by 90 degrees so that this front part is pointing outward. I'll move this across. Maybe scale it up a bit as well. And then I'll mirror this across. So I'll add a mirror modifier. And we'll do it on the y-axis. We need to specify an origin point. So I'm just going to click this object and I'll do Shift S. And we can say move the 3D cursor to the center of the selected object. And I'll use this one and I'll say move the origin, so the little dot in the middle, to the 3D cursor. So origin to 3D cursor, and now this mirror modifier will work. If you find that your eyeball is a little bit wonky, the mirrored one, then instead of using the origin, what you can do instead is set the mirror object to be the sphere, so the head, and then it should work. Press it to X, now we've got two eyeballs. I'll leave it as a mirror modifier, that's fine. And now we'll select this one again, and we'll go back into sculpt mode, and we can start sculpting around those eyeballs. So let's bring this tool up again. I'm just going to, in fact, rather than draw them, I'm actually going to use the bulge tool. So the inflate tool is going to inflate outwards based on the normal. If we turn the strength up a bit, we can start moulding these eye sockets around the eyeballs. Maybe bring this part outwards. So I'm going to use the elastic tool. I'm just going to bring that forward, maybe make it a bit bigger. Maybe use the grab tool so we've got a bit more control. I think that looks adequately psychotic. So next up, let's add a mouth. And for this, we'll use another mask. So use the mask tool, just paint a mask. We'll zoom in and just paint the shape of the mouth that you want. Maybe something like that. I'm going to invert the mask, so that's the only part that I can affect. I just want to smooth it as well. So mask, and then smooth mask. And then we can use any of these tools that will inflate it inwards or displace it inward. So either the draw tool with control held, or the inflate tool with control held as well. So I'll probably go with the draw tool. I'll make it quite a large brush, and I'll zoom out a bit. And I'll just draw that in, making sure I hold control so it goes inwards. I'll just bring those back so we're not getting the eyeballs come through. Make it a bit smaller. And then we'll just get a bit more depth on there. And again, we've gone inwards, we're getting very stretched out faces here. Let me just bring that back up. You can see we've got really large faces, which is no good for sculpting on. Let's just go back into solid view, press R, Control R to remesh it. And I can smooth those with the Shift key. Maybe bring that bottom mouth part outwards a little bit. So I'm going to use the grab tool, make it quite big, and bring this outwards. And again, I can't do it with the mask on, so it needs to be a mask, clear mask, and now we've got access to the rest of it. I'll just smooth that out a little bit. Now we can use that grab tool to grab at this and pull it outwards. Alright, I think that's looking pretty good. So shape your mouth however you want it. I think we'll also add a couple of nostrils. So the way we can add nostrils is by using, again, any of these tools. But we'll probably go with let's go with the blob tool this time, because this one, in the brush options, has a magnify option, which basically controls how sharp it becomes as it goes inwards. So I'm going to change this sort of maybe down to about 0.3, so it does become a little bit narrower as it goes inward. And if we make this a little bit smaller, we can then hold on there with Control, and it's going to go inwards. Now it's only going to go inwards by a set amount, and that's because we need to tell it to keep going inwards. And again, you need to make sure you've got the airbrush on so that you don't need to move the mouse. It will keep going just by holding the mouse button down. But to get it to continue going inwards, then we need to change the brush option to be accumulate. So this way it's going to keep going in as long as we hold that mouse button down, and it will go in the direction of the view. So let's go to about here. I'll probably add a mask again just so I can get a better shape. I don't want it to be circular. So go into the mask tool and I'll draw a shape on there, maybe something like this. I'll just smooth it, and mask, smooth mask. It's a little bit too dim now, so I think what I'm actually going to do is do mask, and then we'll do increase contrast. It's not increased by a lot, and if we go into the redo panel down here, or press F9, we can turn off auto iteration so that we've got more control with the iterations and we can do it manually. Maybe something like that. So we've still got a bit of a soft edge, so it's not going to be too harsh. But even if we don't, we'll still be able to smooth it afterwards, so it's not too important. Right, so we'll change that up so it's covering the entire area, and I'll go the direction that I want the nostrils to go in, making sure I've turned accumulate on in the brush options for this blob. So accumulate is turned on. I'll just hold it in, making sure I hold Control so it goes inwards. And we need to Control I with the mask. So this is the white area. And now we should be able to hold Control. It will go inwards. Now, if I come to this angle, it will change direction and go upwards. So that's pretty good. I'll do Control R to remesh it again. So we've got more resolution in there. And then maybe I'll use the grab tool just to move these a bit more upwards on the inside. Maybe let's turn off the masks. So I've assigned the mask to my quick favourite, so I'm just going to use clear mask in there, and now I can modify the shape. And if I want one nostril to be a bit different to the other one, for example a snarl, I'll turn off the symmetry briefly, and now I can modify these individually. And I'll just use the draw tool, make it a smaller brush, and do Control R again. And I'll just add a little bit of maybe a little bit of a bump to the nose there. We use Control to add a little bit of a dip. And don't worry if yours doesn't look like mine. This is just to get used to the tools. So, whatever you do is completely correct. I think I'd like to add a little bit of a crease down here. So we can use the crease brush. This will add a crease in there for us, like that. Or alternatively, we can use the, where is it? This one, the pinch brush. It's a similar thing, but this will actually pull both sides together, whereas the crease brush will add a crease even on a flat surface. So if we do that, we can bring them in like that. It's a bit of a different result, so whichever you think looks best. I'll probably go with the crease, actually. Make it a bit smaller. I think I'll just smooth these nostrils a little bit, so I'll zoom in. Maybe increase the resolution now, so I'll press R. Bring that down just a little bit, not too much, I don't want to destroy my computer. Probably about here, and then Control R, remesh that. It's going to take a little while longer, but now we'll be able to smooth a lot more without losing too much shape. So I'll just hold Shift down while I draw this to smooth it out with the draw brush. But that's a little bit too strong, I think, the effect. I'm losing a little bit too much detail. So what I need to do is modify the smooth brush itself. I can't change the strength with the draw brush because that's only going to affect the draw, not the Shift smooth operation. So I need to select the smooth brush and then change the strength of that. So now if I right click, and I'll turn that strength down, something quite low, and I'll be able to modify it now with the other brushes while holding Shift with a less of a sort of a impact on the shape. So let's have a look at how we can make teeth. So for teeth, we've got a few options. We could use any of the brushes we've got here and then just turn on Accumulate. And then, so if we go with this one, for example, and I change this Magnify to 0, it's going to be a very sharp brush. It's going to get narrower the further it comes out. So let's just try that. I'll turn this down. And it's going to come towards the view. So probably about here. Just hold it down. It's going to keep coming out. Now we've run into a problem. We've run out of geometry. As that's extended outwards, the faces have become so large that it can't extend any further. So what we can do, I'll just undo this. We can use something called Dino Topo. And this will actually remesh as we draw, but just the area that's been drawn. Now you've got to be careful with this tool because if you've got things like UV maps or any attributes and things like that, or if you've got any colours, say you've painted some colours onto this with vertex colours using the paint tools we've got down at the bottom, where is it? The paint tool we've got here. So let me just show you. If I add a colour attribute now, and an attribute, as we mentioned earlier, is just data that you can store in each vertex. So you can create as many attributes as you want. For example, position is just an attribute which describes the X, Y, and Z position of each vertex. Whereas a colour one, it holds the R, G, and B values of that vertex. And then I choose this colour brush and start painting, I don't know, like a white or green or something like that. You'll see we're only getting the vertex colours, but if I now turn on Dino Topo, so let's come back over to one of these tools, turn on Dino Topo, you say it's going to delete all of the stuff that we've created on the mesh. So I'm not too bothered at this point because I'm still sculpting, but it's something to bear in mind. So I click OK, and it's going to get rid of all that data that we've got on there. And just to bring back the view that we had, we're going to have to go over here, make sure we change this from attribute, which it automatically changed to as soon as I added that colour. As soon as I started painting, it changed the viewport shading to attribute mode so that we could see this colour attribute that we added. So what I need to do is change it back to material, and we'll be back to where we were before. So we've got the Dino Topo turned on. Let's just minimise that. Now Dino Topo, it sort of subdivides as you draw. So if I do the same thing I did before now, let's come to about here, make the brush a bit bigger. It's going to keep coming outwards. But it still didn't get very far because the faces aren't being subdivided small enough. And that's what this setting here is for. So the detail side, is the size of the face, the new faces. So if I change this to something lower, like 4, and then do the same again, so you've got a lot more detail now, and it's going to allow us to bring that tooth out a bit further. Now, this is not the best way to make a tooth. The best way to make a tooth, but just undo that, in my opinion, is to use the snake hook. So the snake hook will actually you'll be able to draw outwards from the mesh just based on your strokes. If I draw this out now, let's make it a bit bigger, we can actually draw it out, and we've got quite a decent control because it's just like drawing on the screen basically. Just undo that. That was a little bit too small. Let's check what we've got set up in the brush settings. We'll probably turn on rake so it aligns the new faces to the topology. Let's try that. We're still not getting very far, and that's because I need to turn up probably the, let's say we'll turn magnified down a bit. Might make it come even shorter. Let's try. About the same. So we're not getting far enough, which basically means it's becoming too thin too quickly. So I want to make that fatter, and in order to do that, I'll turn the magnify up a bit. Let's try this. And now you'll see it's becoming thin, much slower, so we can bring it out further. And I'll just do it again. Maybe you can see we can get quite far with that now. I'm going to turn on symmetry. So let's go with X symmetry so it does both teeth on both sides at the same time. Bring it down to about here. Something like that. And now I've got the thicker ones done. I can turn down the magnify so they get thinner quicker. They won't be as long. Bring those down. We'll go all the way around. Just adding teeth, and I'll turn the magnify down a bit so we get smaller. And we can change the brush size as well, of course. And then we'll do the same thing on the bottom. So we get bigger ones here, about there. And then we'll bring those up. Something like that. And then I'll turn off Dino Topo so that I can remesh. I can't remesh with Dino Topo on. I'll turn that off, and I'll do Control R to remesh. And that'll give us a bit more resolution, and then I'll smooth it down using the mesh filter. Now, I don't want to use the smooth brush because I'm going to lose a lot of the detail. Let me just show you what I mean. If I've got the mesh filter set to smooth mode at the top, you'll see we're going to start losing quite a bit of detail, a bit too much detail. So what we can do instead is change this to surface smooth, and that will, so that's there, surface smooth. That will allow it to sort of smooth the surface whilst retaining the detail. I'll smooth that now. We're getting it smoother, but we're not getting such a, not losing all that fine detail. And of course, once we've done that, we can start manipulating the teeth if we want to bring them out into different directions. But I'm quite happy with that, although I think I'll bring these two front teeth outwards a little bit. So I want to mask these so that I don't affect the surrounding teeth. And of course, to do that, we'll use masks. We're going to mask, and we're going to use the expand mask by topology. So click on that, the cursor is going to change, and now we can click on one of the teeth, and we can expand that out based on the, so it follows the topology, like that. I'll come to about here, and then I'll smooth that. So mask, smooth mask, so it's more gradual at the edge of the teeth there. And I'll invert the mask, and then I'm going to turn on the, let's go with this tool we've got here, the pose tool. So the pose tool works by, it's sort of a temporary bone system so that you can put a little bone inside the geometry that you're currently hovered over, and then you can move it around as if you were posing a skeleton. And you can change in the brush settings the number of links you've got on your skeleton. So at the moment I've only got 1. If I change that to 2, then I'm going to have more points on there so that I can bend, like more like an arm. But of course, I don't want to do that. I just want one because it's a tooth. I'll come into side view. I'll turn it up a bit so it goes all the way to the top of the tooth. I'll bring those outwards a bit. And I might do the same. In fact, let's just turn that down a bit as well. So I'll just get this end bit. And I'll rotate that around to straighten it out a bit. And I want those teeth to be a little bit thinner on the end. So I'll use the inflate brush, but I'll use it with control. And then just bring those in a little bit on the end to make them sharper. And we'll smooth it a bit. I think I'm going to do the same with these two teeth here. So I'm going to clear that mask. And then I'm going to do expand by topology again. I'm going to choose this one. And then drag until I get it how I want it. About there. And I'll smooth it again. And I'll use the bone tool again. You can find it, pose tool. Make it a bit bigger. So it goes for the entire length of the tooth. Ooh. Need to invert the mask. I'll bring those outwards a bit. And I'll maybe try with the elastic deform now. Oh, I need to change this. I've set it to rotate, I forgot. So we go under the deformation for this brush, and I'll choose tri-scale grab. That's the default. Now if I move these, start dragging those around. And maybe I will rotate those a bit, so I'll try the rotate brush. We'll zoom out a bit perhaps. Maybe go with the normal grab. Something like that. Looks pretty good. What I want to do is leave space for a tongue. So I'll clear the mask. Q, clear mask, Q, expand mask by topology. Let's try that. There we go. So I want to get these ones. I also want to get the bottom ones there. I'll smooth those, smooth the mask. And I'm just going to use the normal, let's go with the grab one this time. Invert the mask. Let's drag outwards like this. So now I've got a bit of a space for a tongue to come out. And I'll clear the mask. And then I'll, this time, rather than using, in fact what we could do is, let's hide some of this mesh so that we can more easily bring that tongue out. I'm going to choose the box hide. I'm just going to drag an area to get rid of all the teeth and things. It's about there. I'm going to initially bring it out using the blob tool, making sure I've still got accumulate turned on, and it's going to be in the airbrush mode. I'll bring it out and I'll fatten it a little bit with the inflate. And now I'm going to use this brush, snake hook, to bring it out, and I'll probably need to turn back on. In fact, let's just use the elastic deform. We'll bring that out like that. Problem is I'm affecting the top area, so again I'm just going to mask this tongue. So Q, expand mask by topology. We'll set the end of that, bring it out to about here. We'll smooth that mask. And then I'll use the elastic deform, invert the mask, and now we can bring out just this part without affecting the rest of the model. So I'm not using the snake hook there. I could do that. Let's try that. We go the snake hook. We'll just bring it out, and you can see we can get more of a shape like that. I should have probably turned on dynamic topology again here, but I've got a pretty good result. It came out far enough without doing that, and now I can remesh it, Control R, and that's going to unhide as well. And now we can hide the mask, so Q, clear the mask. I think actually what I'm going to do is just select this part of the model, the tongue, so I can work on that by itself without the rest of the model being in the way. And then we can do that with face set. So face set is very similar to mask, but it gives you a little bit more things you can do, and you can actually modify the geometry with the face sets as well. So I'll choose this one, and I can either draw it on all the way to the end, but the problem is it's overlapping, so I'll undo that. And for face sets, we've got the similar sort of options. We've got expand face set by topology. I'll choose that one, and then I'll draw on there until I get to the end of the tongue. And now what I can do is hover over this and press H, and it will isolate just the tongue so that I can then draw on that by itself. And I'll just get rid of the face set now by saying face set from visible, or in fact we have to have the rest of the model available for that to work. So let's just ignore that for now. I'm going to smooth it out a little bit with the smooth brush. Then I'm going to make it, inflate it in different parts. So I'll probably inflate it there, maybe inflate it a bit here as well. And then for the middle bit, I'm going to add a bit of a crease. So let's choose the creased brush, and we'll add a crease into the middle, make the brush a bit smaller. We could even use the draw brush with Control. Now we've got a much more interesting tongue. I'll smooth it on the bottom as well. We can probably add a little bit more detail. Let's perhaps add a little bit of clay. So a clay is similar to a draw brush, but it's going to sort of flatten. It's going to add clay on top of it, but it's going to flatten and add. So let me just show you what I mean. Draw that on. We can start adding just more volume that we can then either smooth out or just modify further. I'll bring that down a bit. Maybe we'll start just adding bits of interest on there. Or we could use the clay strips. So this is similar to the clay. This time it uses a square brush. So if I add some clay on there, you can see that's a square brush. Well, I think for the tongue, that's looking pretty good. So I need to get the rest of the model back now. I'll press Alt-H, and this will unhide everything. And then to get rid of the face set, I'll just say face set from visible. And now everything's back to how it was. So that's looking pretty good. We've got a little bit of a smoothing issue inside there. I'm just going to use the draw brush or the smooth brush, and I'll just zoom in a bit and we'll smooth that out. We have got a bit of a problem here. You'll notice we've got a little strayer item in midair. So I'm going to get rid of that. And to do that, I'll just use face sets again. A face set on here, just by drawing on this one bit that we don't want. So I've made that an entire face set now. The rest of the model there's no sort of face set on there. We can now get rid of that area using the Edit Face Set tool. So Edit Face Set. We've got different modes for this, so we can use the Delete Geometry. So let me click on that one. Now if I click on this, it will delete just that face set that's underneath the brush. So I definitely don't want to click on this one, otherwise it will delete the entire model. A few of the remaining tools that we've not yet covered, and to better demonstrate what those brushes do, I'll just add a few more details. So I'm going to add the details with the Draw Sharp tool. I'll just add some details along the forehead, like this. Maybe turn the strength right up, just for demonstration purposes. I'll make them a little bit further apart. So you can see here, we've got peaks and troughs. Now, if I want to fill this area in, I could try and smooth it all out, but we're going to lose the detail on the peaks. So what we can do is use the fill brush. So let me just show you how this works. It will keep the peaks, but it will fill in the bits in between only. So you can see what's happening there is it's only affecting the dips. That can be quite handy. And if we use the control key for this, it will turn it into a scrape option, providing we've turned that on the right hand side here in the brush settings. You can see we've got invert to scrape, which basically means it will use this scrape tool here. And the scrape tool, it just basically scrapes, so it sort of flattens it out. Very similar to the flatten brush that we've got above it. And then we've got multi-plane scrape, so we can actually create a double scrape like that. And I think I'll probably just smooth it out a little bit now with the smooth brush on the edges there. Maybe take those down a tad. And there we go. So that's the basics really of the Sculpt tools, the ones that you're most likely going to be needing. We have got other ones like nudge. I mean, these basically just move the mesh a tiny part in the direction that you drag the mouse. We've got the boundary. This is very similar to the pose, but it's for the boundaries of an object. So for example, if you've got a plane, then the outer edge is the boundary because there's nothing else connected to it. And this will act as sort of a pose tool just for those boundary parts. We've also got slide relax, which will relax the faces, and simplify, which is only for dyno topo, which will allow you, when you've got dyno topo turned on, it will allow you to interactively remesh different areas to a different size. So let me just show you that in actual fact. I'll just save this for now. Control S. Let's turn dyno topo on. And I'll just turn on the wireframe overlay so I can see what you can see what this does. It's a very dense mesh. Just check the settings, yeah, they seem fine. So the further out I come, the bigger those faces are. If I zoom right in, we're going to get quite small faces. So it's quite handy if you want to simplify your model in terms of the amount of geometry you've got in places that don't need that sort of small geometry. For example, around the side and the back and things, I could quite easily get away with quite a large geometry and it won't really impact the shape of the object. Whereas if I try and do that in this area, then obviously we might start getting problems. Not too bad there though. But if I go too big, like to here, then we are going to start getting quite a big loss of detail. I'll just undo all that. Control Alt and Z will bring up this undo history. There we go. I'll just turn that wireframe back off now over here.